Okay, well, we're here and we are excited to have another episode of the AOS Straight Talk podcast. With us today, we have Nick Greenfield, who is the CEO of Candid. And to get started, can you just give us a little bit of background on yourself and kind of how you came to the place you are today with Candid?
I think there's no place I'd rather be than the Straight Talk podcast. It's embedded in the name. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Candid, which is pretty much what the goal of the name means is that straight talk. So we appreciate being on. I've been in the dental industry now for about 9 years, and prior to that was working in startups. So I started at a company called Zimride, which became Lyft, and helped launch Lyft around the country, the ride-sharing competitor of Uber, and then worked at a couple other startups before getting going in Candid. But I feel like coming up on almost 10 years in the dental industry, I'm pretty much a dental guy now. So not a dentist by training, but have learned a whole lot about everything across the field, and really excited to continue in this amazing industry.
Yeah, man, that's a journey going from sort of tech startups to the dental industry. I'm guessing there's a lot of crossover there, but how did that background kind of prepare you for where you are now?
There is a surprising amount of crossover between technology startups and dental practices. What I love when I go into one of our partner practices is seeing how doctors have figured out how to build their own small business. And whether it's the hiring and the managing of employees to growing their revenue to figuring out what equipment to buy, every single dental practice that is a non DSO is effectively its own startup. And I think there's a lot that resonates between being the founder of your own dental practice and the founder of a company. Yes, it's at a different scale, but we're all going through very similar challenges.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing that seems to always be changing is that nothing ever stays the same, and one aspect of that now, I guess, is technology is playing such a big role in the evolution of dentistry, kind of as we go along that journey. Now, you started with Candid around 2017, is that right?
That's right. Yep.
So you had a real fun journey, kind of from 2017 through COVID and all of that. What was that like for you and for Candid?
The business started in a different business model before we launched our flagship brand, which is called Candid Pro. We've been exclusively Candid Pro for about 4 years. But in the original iteration of the business, we had to, run and manage our own retail shops with our panoramic X-rays, and we explored putting dentists directly into those locations and working with a team of virtual orthodontists to help oversee and case management. So lots of different kind of iterations going through it. But I think one unifying factor of COVID for the dental industry was it wasn't good. I don't think there was anything good that happened in that, and a ton of learning for the industry as a whole about pandemics and how do we handle situations like that. So in the Candid Pro business, we've seen a lot of our practices now, rebound and maybe even surpass where they were pre-COVID. Our business in Candid Pro has been growing tremendously over the last 4 years, which is always, really nice to see, and especially in partnership with, some of those fast-growing practices. But there's also practices out there that are definitely still feeling it. I think the dental industry as a whole, post 2021, maybe 2022, has been in a bit of a rut. You see it in fewer implant procedures, lower overall ortho volume across the board, or at least flat ortho volume across the board. And I think everyone's excited to get back to growth.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so you completely changed the business model at Candid. That must have been a, a, a seismic change in terms of direction and kind of your overall structure as an organization. What was that like?
I think most great businesses end up doing something different and doing things pretty differently from how they started. So I think pivots are totally a natural part of kind of business development and learning how to operate. You go in with a hypothesis, and maybe that hypothesis was wrong. So in the case of our original Candid business, we thought that doing virtual only care with US licensed orthodontists overseeing and planning care directly with patients was the right way to go. And we learned that actually patients want to be seen by their dentist. In fact, 80% of patients would rather start orthodontic care with their dentist than start in a direct to consumer manner or even start with a specialist. So it happens that dentists really play this key role in all of the recommendation experience for all things dental care related, including ortho, which is a specialty. And so we've seen that thematically evolve as we've evolved. We've seen more and more dentists bring more and more specialty into their practices and learn more how to market, how to bring patients in. It's an ever increasing competition in the market. So how do dentists get an edge locally in their markets through better reviews, better online presence? And now we're going to see, by the way, and I know you know this being a marketing expert, we're going to see the evolution of AI and
Mm.
specifically ChatGPT being many folks' homepage now in their default search experience, which is going to totally upend all the SEO work that everybody's done over the last few years. So again, as we've thought about pivoting, it's not just Candid, but dental practices have to go through many of these pivots as technology changes. And with the advent of AI, we're going to see, I think, for the better. I think everyone will end up better off, but there's going to be some change over the next few years.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what do you think? So you mentioned people are sort of insourcing more specialty services within their practices, GPs and pediatric dentists, things like that. And I'm sure that technology has played a role in that. I'm sure that sort of the ease of workflow that something like a clear aligner solution provides makes a big difference in that. What How do you kind of view that? What is the opportunity in terms of that for GPs and pediatric dentists? I don't know what percentage of practices are offering some kind of orthodontic solution in their practice, but seems to be growing.
We see that the first key to bringing and insourcing ortho and other experiences in your practice is going digital. And the trend is definitely that more and more practices are fully going digital. And what I mean by that is intraoral scanners, wellness scans, scanning every patient, making sure that you have a full digital record of that patient in your patient management system as well as with your scanner, right? So that's the key, because once you have that digital file, the treatment planning options now are so much more robust than they were 5 years ago. The ability to use computer aided design to think about a fully comprehensive treatment plan that could include ortho. It can also include implants. It can include veneers, and being able to present that almost instantly to a patient. And there are tools out there now where in 15 minutes you can show a patient an orthodontic simulation, or you can show them an entire kind of full mouth, let's call it a full mouth upgrade rather than a restoration, especially as you're thinking about kind of younger patients out there. So in terms of ortho, we've seen that almost every practice that we go into has done some level of orthodontic training. It's usually a weekend course with a brand, usually the main brand that everybody knows. And for the most part, we see that that is not enough to get folks clinically confident to be able to diagnose, prescribe, and treat orthodontics. So we'll see that most dentists that we go into are doing 0 to 1 cases a month. They might be doing that one case, might be a light case, like a 5 stage. This is a really easy case. And the number one challenge that doctors are facing across the board is lack in clinical confidence. And once they get that clinical confidence going, then it's about workflow implementation. This is where we talk about digital, the handoffs between treatment coordinators, office managers, hygienists, and the treating dentist, right? So getting that workflow going. And then it's about building the business savvy around marketing, financing options. And once you stitch all of that together, we see practices that'll go from 0 cases a month to 4 or 5, even 10 cases a month by bringing that whole experience together. So it's not just one thing that you've got to learn. It's not just about the clinical confidence, but once you're there, we can really help you systematize.
Yeah. Um, and at any of those stages along the way is an opportunity for sort of you know a breakdown of growth, I guess, of this is too hard. We're not, you know I'm too busy to kind of take this on right now, sort of a thing. I know a couple of years ago you started partnering with the American Orthodontic Society for some. education and things like that. Um, and what has been really interesting is to see practices that kind of are already doing some kind of clear aligner treatment, including Candid, coming to those courses and kind of going through that process, sometimes with their team, to build their kind of knowledge in a focused, kind of hands-on environment. Talk a little bit about how you see that in terms of the benefit for the practices.
When we partnered with AOS, we saw that Dr. Matt Standridge, who phenomenal doctor, now based out of Oklahoma, formerly out of Kansas. He likes Oklahoma because he's closer to an airport. It used to be a multi-hour drive to get anywhere.
Mm,
And Dr.
yep.
Standridge teaches this fantastic course, especially on the fundamentals and the basics. And so, where does that start? Well, it starts with case selection. And we see that most general dentists are not clinically confident in even identifying which are the cases that they should be treating and maybe which are the cases that they shouldn't be treating. And so instead of discussing the orthodontic option with the patient, usually they just kind of throw their hands up, or if they're going to want to do anything at all, they say, you need to go see, this doctor down the road because I don't really do that in my practice. And so Dr. Standridge starts with those fundamentals on things like identifying cases, because that's where you've got to build your confidence set that even just for a month or two, looking and saying, okay, I think I could treat this. This one I probably shouldn't treat. This one I should refer. This one maybe needs to start with some restorative work, or maybe this is going to help me ahead of a restorative case. So understanding what are those options, and again, through this course at the American Orthodontic Society, you're starting to develop that skill set. What Candid Pro does better than any company out there is we put an orthodontist in between the diagnosis and your treatment plan. So once you've identified the patient and submitted that case, a US licensed orthodontist will actually sit in between and help provide a secondary diagnostic overview, a treatment plan, provide notes on, hey, this is where I think this will go, help you understand what potential limitations are look like, maybe even say, hey, I think this is a case that you need to refer out, right? This is a case that might be too difficult. And then if the case ends up going into refinement, which happens, right? Patients aren't compliant, things don't always track exactly the way that they're supposed to. In that moment, you then have that orthodontist who's there to back you up. So we see that doctors can get more clinically confident over time as they get this support and this interdisciplinary care. And we believe that that partnership between orthos and dentists, combined with a really robust learning curriculum, which again, in this weekend course with Dr. Standridge, you can really start getting up the curve, and there's other areas to supplement. And then you layer on some of the business savvy, can help build orthodontics inside your practice as a very, very strong unit of what you're doing to drive better clinical results for patients. And obviously, there's also the business benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been interesting because I've sat through Dr. Stanwich's course as well, and the thing that's unique, or one thing that's a little unique about kind of what he has to offer is he's come from a background of treating ortho with other tools like traditional brackets and wires and things like that, so he can kind of help translate people coming from any number of perspectives, where different tools might fit in, or also kind of moving from one system to another system as your primary treatment modality. Or if you have no experience at all, he can kind of help on that journey. A lot of it too comes down to just sitting there and seeing it, having a focused time to work on it. We have doctors who come back the second year to monitor, and just seeing their progression from year one to year two, their level of confidence, the kind of baseline of revenue that they're seeing, production in their practice, cases that they may not have even diagnosed for ortho previously, but now they have that experience to see the opportunity. Um, there's just a wealth of benefits from that.
We see in the ortho world as well, so you move from generalist to specialist. There is a progression going from fixed into aligners. And that's part of the digital experience. And, I know a number of doctors that are these $5 to $10 million single location orthodontic offices. And they've really transformed by going fully digital. Digital scanners, clear aligners. Uh, they're not manufacturing in house. They're using labs. And that they get more and more confident about case selection of what goes to fixed and what goes to aligners. And over time, we're seeing more and more of those doctors shift their cases to clear aligners because they're getting these multi-year clinical results, especially on complex cases. And then there's, of course, the 13-year-old boy who's not going to wear his aligners, and they're not going to be compliant, and no matter what, you're going to end up putting that patient in wires and brackets. So it's an interesting dynamic to see not only the clinical capabilities, but to some extent also the behavioral psychology around what do you tell the parents and the kids. And I think that's where monitoring can be really helpful. When you have a remote digital monitoring tool that through AI every week the patient has to take a scan of their teeth, not only does that give the doctor information back, but with the Pro monitoring app that comes standard with all the Candid Pro cases, you get this ability to drive patient compliance because the patient knows they're getting checked every week, even though it's through AI and it's virtual and it's at home in the bathroom on Saturday night in the mirror.
Hmm.
They still increase their likelihood of being compliant. And so I think that that's really the bridge here is if you want to do more aligners, you got to figure out how you actually get the patients to wear their trays. Because if they don't wear their trays, they're not going to track. And then these cases will go from 12 or 13 months to 24 months plus.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible to see practice. We have this conversation almost every September with our clients that we work with on the marketing side of like, well, September is a terrible production month for our practice because school has just started and people are focused on other things, whatever. Um, Ortho really changes that because you kind of have that baseline of revenue for the practice that's recurring for the practice over time, and it just is a whole different thing. Some of our practices, pediatric practices, especially, sometimes 50% of their production is ortho. So it can be a real game changer for practices that haven't offered it in the past, to kind of build that strength in their practice.
September was a better month for us than October this year, which is
Mm,
crazy.
yeah.
It's just kind of a crazy idea because historically September obviously hasn't been that good, but we just saw September this year that back to school rush and parents wanting to put their kids into aligners is continuing to grow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I will just make a call out here real quick that we do have, so with Dr. Standridge, he does offer his clear line of boot camp twice a year. So the next one coming up is going to be March 13 and 14, 2026 at our AOS Institute in Dallas, Texas. It's really convenient for anybody who is curious or interested in attending. Um, and the facilities is like 5 minutes from the airport. So if you don't have a direct flight to Dallas, most places do. Just to say. Um, so yeah, if anybody is interested in attending, feel free to sort of check out the website orthodontics.com. Um, and we would love to have you there. Um, in terms of what you mentioned, kind of the stages that people go through in adding ortho to their practice. What would be your best advice to someone who's looking to get started in terms of a roadmap? Like what progression should they be expecting? Let's say that this is their goal for 2026. What kind of should their roadmap look like?
I would say first you want to think about clinical education and how you're going to get yourself kind of up the curve. And so Dr. Standridge's course is a great way to do that. If you're going to do it on your own, at least through Candid Pro, we have a learning management system which has an introductory course we call Care 1 and Care 2. These are fundamentals of just how tooth movement works. The advantage, at least for us with the Candid Pro experience, is you're going to have an orthodontist in the background. So you really need to get comfortable around, hey, let's scan some patients. Let's talk to those patients about what they'd like to do, and let's submit some cases and see kind of how we can think about getting these treatment plans done. From there, so you want to think about scaling. Now it's workflow implementation. If you're just selecting patients say they want to do ortho, you're saying yes, great. When you talk to the large volume dental practices, over 50% of their clear aligner cases are coming from their hygiene chair. And so learning in hygiene and learning about malocclusion and hygiene is a really critical component, which requires real training for the hygiene team to go through and understand how to identify and then how to show the dentist and show the patient. So when the dentist comes in, you can have a really strong handoff. Post hygiene, you need to be able to close cases. And that means implementing the appropriate case fee model for the patient. It means having availability and pricing. It means understanding if you're fee for service, how out of network insurance will play, and if you're in PPO, how potentially insurance plays into that as well. And it's understanding how the various payment options are for patients. I can't stress enough how important that is. This is a procedure that patients view as an elective procedure. And so making sure that patients have payment options that make sense once they've accepted the idea of treatment is really critical. And then from there, there's a whole subset of other additional trainings, advanced trainings, learning about other ways that ortho can be helpful in your practice. For example, combo ortho and restorative, airway, thinking about setting that patient up for other different types of procedures that they may need to do, how ortho can help with gingival health, right? These are all areas where there is academic opportunities. We have learning management system opportunities, and then there's one-to-one training. So I would suggest that if you're looking to obviously partner, we'd love to partner with you and help you through that journey. But most companies will think about doing it. It's very hard to just go at it alone. So you really want to write out a kind of a game plan over 6 to 12 months, and that'll help you go from a case a month to, we see doctors over the course of a year getting to a case a week, and then maybe getting to a case a day, right? If you've got 8 patients coming into your hygiene chair on a daily basis, and you're running 3 chairs, you've got 24 patients you're speaking to. You get 30 to 40 new patients a month. You've got new patient consultations. These are all at bat opportunities to really help educate patients around the importance of aligning and straightening their teeth and what that can do for their long-term oral health.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely can be a little bit daunting for some people, and often it's taking the first step, and and we have lots of resources to kind of guide them along the way, which is great. Um, you talked a little bit about this trend with AI, and there's so many other tech trends. I think there are certain things from the pro monitoring to the sort of design of your aligners to so many other things. What do you kind of see as kind of where you are now, how tech has enabled that, and also where do we go in the future with some of these things?
Yeah, so we'll start from beginning and work our way to the end of treatment. The beginning of treatment, intraoral scans. Intraoral scans used to have to put powder on the patient's teeth, and then it would take 20, 30 minutes to get a good scan. And it was like, why am I doing this? Why am I not just taking a PVS impression and sending it in? Digital scans now, we see some companies and some assistants and hygienists who are doing scans in 2 to 3 minutes, top and bottom and bite ridge. So scanning that patient for every patient at least once a year, if not once a year, every other year, as part of your cycle. You're taking x-rays, you should be taking scans, right? That way you have the digital record for the patient ready to go. Now, with whether you're using a Trios, if you're using an Itero, a Lumina, Medit, whatever scanner you're using, they all have embedded simulation tools, which are AI-powered simulation that can show the patient what their teeth will look like if they go through clear aligner treatment. Now, it's not exactly the staging that's going to happen, but that is a possibility. From there, once you submit the case, AI diagnostics are now becoming much more common. So on the back end, we can actually look at that case and identify complexity, and then kind of depending on the ending position, how much movement is happening, what movements are happening, how predictable are those movements going to be, and that will help again drive a higher likelihood clinical outcome. Eventually, you're going to be able to take a scan and have a true AI setup that's actually clinically going to work based on not just algorithms, but actually based on true clinical data. There are now a couple companies where you can take a scan and boom, get an instant treatment setup. But you've got to really know how to move the teeth after that on the treatment planning side, or you're going to get unrealistic outcomes for the most part on the tooth movement there. Then you can do direct printing at some point, not just of attachment templates, but eventually same day starts, right? That's coming. And if you know the workflow, you can actually get into it now. And then once the patient is in treatment, then there's monitoring. And that for me is the most exciting component of AI. The average Candid Pro provider does 3 office visits per treatment versus 10, which is what they were doing before. So having AI-powered monitoring enables a patient to scan their teeth at home with their iPhone or Android device in a scan box that kind of looks like an Oculus for your mouth. AI reads how the aligners are fitting, how the teeth are tracking, and automatically keeps the patient in that same step after a week or moves them on to the next step. And that helps really course correct and make sure that patients aren't getting off track, which means faster outcomes, right? 13 months on average versus 22 and a half months. And it also means fewer aligners that need to be printed and patients, again, driving a higher level of personal compliance or compliance for their kids. So you get the whole component from diagnostic to treatment planning to patient management and ultimately to being able to scan your teeth and generate with your phone after you've done an intraoral scan and generate new retainers, for example, off of just an at-home scan. So AI is getting us to this point, and I think we see it with tools like Overjet, NVIDIA, and Pearl, where you get AI diagnostics. For those of you who don't know those tools, incredible for identifying cavities and identifying other issues in the mouth. We're going to see it with more AI patient management, but I think Ortho is one of those tools where, hey, if we can use AI to make treatment half as long with half as many visits and more predictable clinical results, boy, like that's a really good place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to dive in a little bit to the one thing you said about same day starts. Talk a little bit more about what does that look like for a practice, because that could be a pretty appealing thing to offer to patients, that they could come in and get everything they need to start right away.
Yeah, so for those of you who have 3D printers in your office and you want to get that patient going right away, one option is to scan the patient, get them going right there, even just with a retainer, right, with
Hmm.
a passive step, so that they can feel what it's like to have that in their mouth, and make sure you're keeping them in place while you wait for aligners to come. Folks can print attachment templates as well. So if you
Hmm.
know, hey, we're going to be using attachments for this case with Candid Pro, we try to minimize attachments in IPR. But depending on the system that you're using, you can also actually just directly print an attachment template and even scan the patient with those attachments bonded, so you don't need that bonding appointment. So that's another option as well. Kind of what you're doing there. And again, the same day start, as we know in many other areas in dentistry, is just increases the likelihood of case acceptance
Hmm.
and sometimes improves workflow. So we do see some practices trying to apply the same day start methodology. I will say that in aligners, it's relatively novel. It's not all that common, but I do see over the next 3 to 5 years the ability to even have some active stages direct printed, straight away, same day starts, and then getting their full comprehensive set of aligners after that. So probably
Yeah.
more to come from us on that, and I think other companies are also going that way.
Yeah. That's really interesting, because you know everybody wants everything now. So if you can offer that to someone and kind of get them feeling like they're already receiving benefit for what they're paying for, is pretty cool. Um, so one thing, Candid is definitely one of those names that is gaining a lot of market share, um, with practitioners and things like that. But there are also a lot of people using other systems. So what is the payoff for someone who's considering an alternative, for them to kind of explore that a little further, or make the jump to Candid from another system?
Well, if you're a member of AOS, there's a special kind of member introductory offer, which you can learn more about by reaching out to the team directly. So that's definitely one of the benefits, and that obviously has its pricing benefits. We have our starting price, and then work our way all the way down. If you're a diamond provider, we'll status match you. So if you're a high volume clear aligner user already, and you're interested in making a switch, we don't want you to lose all that status. So we have, just like if you were a United Airline, gold or platinum member, we like to be able to switch you over. So I think that that's,
Hmm.
that's number one. I would say number two is really the benefits for you and your practice, at least for Candid. We see that docs who go to Candid Pro have about a 70% reduction in office visits reported.
Hmm.
They start about 13 extra cases per year relative to what they were doing before, because of the combination of that ortho oversight and the improved efficiency in monitoring. And some of them even feel comfortable having a lower case fee because they have more bottom line, with that reduced chair time, reduced cost, less treatment planning time, things staying on track. And that sometimes allows them to go back out to patients who maybe didn't accept treatment and be able to be comfortable offering them a lower fee option. So I think these are all reasons we see people making that switch over to Candid Pro. We are the fastest growing clear aligner designed around the general dentist. One of the things that's unique to Candid is that we designed our product for the general dentist first. And most other ortho products out there were designed originally around the orthodontist and then
Hmm.
given to the general dentist to say, hey, good luck. Here you go. And there's a lot of tools and a lot of complexity when you pull up that treatment planning tool for the first time that you don't know how to use it. So we really tried to streamline and simplify without cutting any corners in terms of clinical outcomes and results. So we have some very, very large orthodontists who actually use our product because they believe that it's the most accurate aligner, that it fits better, that their patients track better, that they can do everything they could do with other systems. But for the general dentist, we want to make that as approachable as possible. And that's why, in combination with taking a course to really understand and learn the basics and the fundamentals, with that orthodontic specialist helping you during treatment, that allows you to really treat a much larger section of your patient base, and really help solve their malocclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that I think can't be, um, overestimated in terms of the value too, as far as what our experience has been, is that Candid is also very responsive to, questions, to feedback, to any of those types of things, which is huge. I mean, if you're a practice and you're dealing directly with patients, and sometimes a lapse of time from when a concern arises and getting an answer, can be a difference of multiple appointments, or being able to get the patient's concerns answered quickly. So those are certainly benefits as well, I would say, to working with a company like Candid.
Yeah, when Lou Schumann originally introduced us to AOS, one of the highlights that he was like, you got to talk about this, you got to talk about this, was just that elevated level of service and support. We
Hmm.
are a very fast growing company, but we have an incredibly dedicated team, both in the field and on our support side, that are hyper responsive to our partners and really try to solve their problems. And, there's companies out there have been around for a long time, a little tired, right? And we've got that energy, right? We like to bring the
Hmm.
energy each and every day to help support our partners, whether it's through clinical learning, workflow learning, training, hygiene, whatever it may be. Or there's a manufacturing question, like we're there, or we want to answer, and our team really deeply cares. It's one of our core values to care deeply. It's actually in the name of the company. We don't have it as officially out there. We do business as Candid Pro, but it's called Candid Care Co. for a reason. Is we do truly care about delivering great quality product to you as a doctor, so you can deliver incredibly high quality results to your patients.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been very, very interesting, and I would say we've sort of scratched the surface in some ways, but hopefully we will have you back at some point in the near future and can dive into some of these specific things. But for today, I appreciate you coming on and sharing a little bit of an introduction to Candid and to yourself, and um, appreciate you partnering with AOS as well.
Let's do it. I would love to come back at some point. If anyone has any questions, I'm Nick, Nick, at candidco.com. Feel free to reach out anytime.
Awesome, thanks. We will
Thanks.
talk to you on the next one.
All right.